Welcome to another SixyTimes Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. This is going to be mostly quiet today. We have a very specific focus, but because we have such a specific focus, and given everything else going on, we don't expect to have a lot of people joining us today. You're more likely going to just be able to watch and, of course, comment in stream chat on Twitch if it suits you. We're definitely probably going to be engaging on that side. But I am not going to have a lot of analysis to throw up today, as it's just, hey, let's focus on our low holds. This is particularly helpful to us today because the characters we expect to see that will be playing more often, given that this is a loser stays on lobby, are more likely to be those that have those moves at range as their engagement options. Now, the people doing the practicing are on the opposite side of this. For the most part, the match you're seeing now is just a warm-up. It's not likely to lead into that as much because while these two do have to think about it, Honoka is not really a character that immediately goes for lows as approaches. She also doesn't tend to go for highs as approaches that often. It is a good option for her, as some of hers do lead into things, but they're not the greatest things to lead into. And you don't really want to work on high holds in that regard. Most of the time you want your high holds to be something you do when you know a big thing is happening next, or you were about to be whiff punished in some way and you might feel as if your opponent might not make it in time. Similarly, her low attacks, while they do lead into things, they generally either whiff entirely or, you're not really worried about that aspect of it when it comes to Honoka. But we're definitely going to be seeing some Helena today, and we're going to be seeing some Brad Wong today. And both of these characters have multi-hitting low moves, do low moves as part of their initial punishes and spaced punishes in certain situations, and have relatively weird highs for engagement as well. So when you are seeing either Honoka or Ayane on screen, you should assume that that player is the one doing most of the practice of the holds part. If they're fighting each other, they'll most likely just be a straight match. And if it's Helena, possibly Hitomi, or Brad Wong, you should then expect to see the high and low holds making their way in. We're not sure which character the Wolf is playing today. It might be Kokoro, in which case, once again, high and low. Might be Mila, in which case closer to the Honoka side. There might be some minor modifications of how people are approaching matches today. Specifically, hey, if your friends are practicing their high and low holds, you might also want to practice some of your engagements of those attack types. Works out for both sides, really. But with all that preamble said, please note if you want to join us, this is more or less an Atlantic Rim lobby. We have 2 map slots open. As loser stays on, you can lose 3 times before you'll be kicked off. The health is slightly above normal for mostly practice purposes, but also we just tend to like it that way. Just note that this won't be quite the same if you're used to tournament style settings or similar. But generally this content isn't for the sort of person who is. And we don't really have much connection restriction normally. There is one today, so just to keep things from being terribly laggy, as we have had some issues with it recently. But for general engagement, hit us up in Twitch chat. And I might have 1 or 2 things to say later on, but for now, it's time for Helena and Ayane probably to face off.
don't have time to play games with you. This is your last chance to run away.
Fight! Get ready! Fight! Get ready! Fight! Get ready! Fight! Get ready! Fight!
What happened to all that spirit you had a moment ago?
One useful aspect of going up against Helena and characters like her is that one gets to quickly find out a specific thing. If you spend a lot of time attempting a low hold and observing your opponent's attacks, you can learn which of their attacks are high based on the fact that they go over you. Using this method as a sort of relaxed way of understanding what you will have to hold high eventually is a good thing. as opposed to trying to figure out what to hold high on its own and getting hit by mids. Now normally, if you don't get the hold off, you should still block the high and the mid the same, but it's confusing enough that you can't be sure. This is particularly troublesome for kicks.
I will give it my all. Let's start.
Similarly, it's easy enough to
This is your last chance.
determine that a move can't possibly be a high, and it must be a mid, based on the fact that you can't evade it by crouching. Simple as that, really. While crouching is an easy way to take a lot of damage in this game, if you are crouching and blocking, you will get hit by all mid attacks, which is the majority of the attacks in the game. If you find yourself having trouble with your holds, crouching is a good way to gather data quickly.
Get ready. Fight.
Similarly, if you find an opponent using a lot of lows, you don't even have to necessarily crouch hold. You can just crouch block, and if they don't go for mids all that often, or if you somehow convince them not to, you'll realize that a move must be a low because you managed to block it, even though normally you would get hit. Anything that hits you, particularly in neutral, this is a good way to get certain things started, because if you are crouch blocking in neutral and your opponent does a long lunging attack that hits you, now you can be almost completely sure that attack is a mid, I need to hold mid when I see it coming. It helps you learn quickly about which of your opponent's lunging attacks matter to your normal block stance, if your normal block stance is just back, as it technically should be in this game. So you could break your standard flow and guard crouching in neutral, which of course limits your movement, but still helpful, in order to find out, well, this lunging move is definitely not a low, this lunging move is oddly a high because I'm crouching and it goes over me. And most importantly, one of the other things that our Ayane in particular intended to work on today was forward dashing, crouching. Crouch dash is a thing in this game. It's just relatively hard to execute if you're not used to pressing the diagonal twice, because you do have to do it fairly cleanly. Not necessarily because you won't get the dash otherwise, but because similar to doing, let's say, a Shoryuken in a 2D game, because those are the games that tend to have that sort of motion, if you don't do it right, other things will happen. You'll end up not blocking for longer periods, you'll end up delaying the frames of it.
Huh? It's the time already? Well, then I better get going.
It's so nice to meet you.
Fight.
We've discussed Kokoro on this stream multiple times before actually. There's really only one thing you need to understand about Kokoro once you've learned to fight basically Kasumi and Ayane. Kokoro has a lot more delay in her moves. And really, that's literally it. That's what you care about. She's either hitting buttons with much less variation than either of those characters, so you can just apply all the principles you understand about holds and blocking and side steps, everything. All of those things just apply normally. Aside from that, she takes longer between moves to do things, meaning that she's harder to predict if you've gotten used to other characters, because if you try to throw, usually she'll get her stuff off just before you actually manage to do this throw. But honestly, it just means that she's a little more complicated to watch. She's technically easier to hold if you can relax, but learning to relax isn't exactly the same thing. For the Brad Wong side, it's not as easy to say, but against our particular Brad Wong, holding in neutral isn't all that hard. The confusing part is mostly we'd mostly assume that a lot of what Brad does should be held in particular ways. And that's the point of this drunken style, to give you the impression, oh, this needs to be held this way. For example, once you see Brad go into that lying down position and come up in a kick, that kick is actually a high. And if you had been crouching, you probably would know that. In general, you should generally crouch against this character. Even because if you don't understand him, that's your best bet to gather all the information you need. If you are crouch blocking, and Brad hits you, and it's a kick, then hold it mid. And if Brad doesn't hit you, either because you blocked it or it whiffs, then you know what to do with it then. But you really should spend a large amount of your time crouch blocking against Brad Wong, just to get the information you need.
Down the hatch.
I cannot lose this fight.
I'm giving this all I got. all that spirit you had a moment ago. I'm giving this all I got.
last chance to run away.
Us!
Fight!
meet you. I will give it my all. Let's start.
what you're watching our Hitomi demonstrate now is actually a little bit harder to see, as it's mostly about Kokoro's relatively limited options in neutral. She doesn't move through the space between two characters all that quickly without attacking, and her strings are again relatively easy to block because they're more predictable than most characters and tend to have slower... The chains are slower, but at the same time they don't get too varied. Whereas most characters who are slow, you also have to worry that they'll do one of two paths. She has them, but they're not very rewarding in comparison. This means that the player is likely to be more tempted to begin a strike from mid-range when they still have enough control to stop doing it and possibly create a mix-up that way. But to a defensive player, or to at least a relaxed defensive player, none of this really matters. They're going to probably keep blocking either way. They're usually skilled enough to defend somewhat automatically. And if they have any options for either outranging or punishing in a way that will lead to at least a knockdown or a knock away, they're able to recreate the same situation. Which is probably the strongest thing you should think about when playing against this sort of character. If you know your character opponent's weakness is that they can't easily get in, then focus your own combos around getting them away from you. That way, when you do happen to use your big damaging combo that leaves you close, you probably have a life lead, and it may surprise the opponent enough that you can then take advantage of the fact that they're not in that mindset anymore. They're thinking about having to get in, the frustration and so on. The moment they don't have to do it, they might more easily fall into a trap. And you can do it without having to continually play exactly the same way as well. You see the same thing here. With Brad's ability to move away and to attack in unconventional ways to interrupt an approaching opponent from fairly far away, while lying on the ground even, Kokoro's weakness becomes even more visible. She definitely has moves to get into position. Tenley, she has moves that should hit Brad if he doesn't react perfectly. But he could react perfectly to quite a lot of them, and just using the same thing over and over again is not really that helpful. She does also, as just demonstrated, have the option to use the same thing mentioned before. She can do a string that will lead her into position in time. Since Brad is in the down position, the timing required to counter that attack before the mid-hit or the slightly lower mid-hit happens can be quite difficult. But this still means that you have to spend a lot more time thinking about it, both your position on the screen and your ability to do it.
I cannot lose this fight.
I will not make it easy, even for you, Helena.
looking at a character who has trouble getting in and has a more difficult approach than general. Getting in the low stance from Helena, Okwo, I believe, from the longer range is apparently very effective, since she can't use any higher charges or such, and if she's not going to close fast enough, Krokoro, that is, if Krokoro is not going to close in fast enough to punish me meaningfully with mids, then I basically have free control because she can't take up the relevant space as easily, since Helena's sweep is really long. Which will then, I suppose, probably require that Krokoro comes in and baits the sweep or things like that, tries to hold it, or does some mid-range manipulation, which changes the match back to the space where I, as a Helena player, am somewhat more comfortable.
Don't make me laugh.
Huh? It's the time already? Well, then I better get going.
One of Hitomi's largest problems with dealing with Brad Wong is that it's completely counterintuitive how she needs to do it. Brad Wong repeats retreating moves can't be whiff punished by most of Hitomi's normals, and the few she can whiff punish with don't lead to anything good, except if Brad was completely out of position. The easier answer for Hitomi in general is to just run up and throw. Everything else will tend to lead to a bad situation. If she feels as if the throw isn't going to work because she's off in her positioning, she can run up and hold whatever she expects to happen, or run up and stop a little short because her timing is off. So it's relatively easy to get through that. Charge forward. If your timing is off, block or hold. If your timing is correct, but your spacing is off, just don't do anything in particular. If they're both right, then you're gonna get your throw, so you don't have to worry about it. And if Brad stops retreating long enough for this to not matter anymore, then you're in a good state and you can go back to playing the game in the way you normally expect to. That's one of the main ways you should always think about fighting games. You have a way that you like to play the game. Your opponent's goal is generally to stop you from playing the game the way you like, or you're both having fun and you're not really thinking about it. If you're being frustrated by your opponent, it's almost always, at least at the mid-levels, that they are doing things that are stopping you from doing something you enjoy doing. And you resolve this by making them stop. You don't necessarily have to get everything right, and you don't necessarily have to set up the situation correctly every time. For example, we're already at that point here. Hitomi can now go back to just playing normally with punishing, punching, hitting lock strings, etc. because Brad is no longer retreating. Brad is more so now guarding space. Learning to adapt the timing of what's going on to recognize that, oh, my opponent has stopped doing the thing I don't like them doing, now I can go back to playing the game the way I like. It's really important to gain this skill, especially because some opponents will just occasionally do that again, just for a moment, to make you think that they've gone back into the same stance. And that can be really rough because that is the best probable feint, mix-up, fake-out you can get. If they stop retreating and then go, wait, I better do this at least once so they don't think I've switched modes. Because that's just valid.
I don't have time to play games with you.
I will give it my all. Let's start. I saw that coming.
Get ready.
Are you ready?
Get ready.
want to do it again? Hmm? It's so nice to meet you.
I cannot. Are you ready?
Get ready. Get ready. Fight! Get ready. Fight!
Let's do it!
Get ready. Fight!
Dude, what happened to all that spirit you had a moment ago?
Alright. I will do my best. Behold, my Baji dance.
Fight!
For Honoka, this is a little more complicated, particularly in a stage as small as this one. She has to block Kokoro for such long periods, and in smaller spaces, she can't get far enough away to get most of her own spacing control style things going. Kokoro also doesn't use the sorts of moves that Honoka's moves easily beat. She does, however, have two main tools for this. Her knee, which you've just seen, which Kokoro could easily hold, but I mean, it's really helpful because if Kokoro is thinking that heavily about holding a mid-kick, a lot of the other options for normal use open up. The other main option she has is more or less her running throw. That's a better way to think about it. While Kokoro will definitely hit buttons, a lot of her good checks for other people's hits involve her just hitting punch, and just hitting punch is relatively easy for Honoka to deal with. In fact, she can use almost all of her meter purely on the break hold, which is also a good way to get through this sort of small stage where you might find yourself pushed to the corner too quickly and not be able to easily control space. Best solution? Break hold your opponent so they're behind you and back away. Since Kokoro can't close in as quickly as most characters after this situation, there's not necessarily as much of an immediate threat, meaning that Kokoro must think even harder about how to do specific staggers in her pressure, specific things in her flow, and not be able to keep that control of mid-range close to the corner that tends to give Honoka all the trouble. As you can see there, because of her flow and the amount of knockback on her moves, it's generally relatively difficult to find a good spacing to do most of the things Honoka wishes to do, forcing even more use of the break hold. When you're close enough, that throw definitely helps, and if you're not, then just don't do anything. Just get out of the situation, get control of the mid-range, and worry about doing things like that, the knee, and when your opponent has hesitated, just run up and throw somewhat. what helps even more is that the way the two interact leads to Honoka having tons of meter, and somehow Kokoro not so much. If you lose your awareness of where you need to be on the screen, and how much meter you have to work with, you're going to end up in a lot worse situations. In this case, for example, you see OmniRabbit actually use the meter to get both damage and to keep control of the middle, to change the situation so that it's not so much about getting pummeled in the corner, but a little bit too fast there. And in this case, Kokoro did have the meter to do something about it.
That was truly a beautiful dance. Thank you.
This is your last chance to run away.
All right. I will do my best.
Fight! Get ready! Fight!
Against ninja characters in games, specifically characters who are like directly designed to be ninjas, your best bet is often to just power through. But this isn't to mean you should just keep attacking. It means you should have more confidence in your attacks, even if you're likely to be wrong. This is because, despite what it may look like, a lot of the time, the way they're designed means your attack will hit anyway. It's the hesitation that they're counting on. Because the movements often involve so much misdirection, it means they also involve a lot of weird redirection of their own force, and it tends to be delivered very precisely, only at one striking point. You can watch Ayane as a very good example of this. Almost every single thing Ayane does, even if it hits multiple times, is still aimed at a very precise spot on the opponent's body. she has like 2 moves that don't do this. And because those 2 moves don't do that, they're actually incredibly useful for her. But they're only confusing in the sense that you don't know what's coming next, not in the sense that any given move is terribly hard to understand about where on the body it's intended to hit. So, when you see a ninja move and you think, maybe I can hit them, one of your better bets is to just try to hit them. It doesn't so much matter whether or not you succeed at any given time, simply because if you don't, you couldn't have been sure anyway. If the character is designed even reasonably well, the result will be that you couldn't be sure that the option you chose would have worked anyway. You have to build up a ton of experience to know with certainty that jump can be anti-aired, that movement can be stopped, that whole move will come at this timing and I can hold it. Once you've built up that experience, of course you can build on it, but most of the time these characters can go even further than that and simply not do the thing. This is generally how growth tends to parallel itself between players who play this type of character and players who have to counter them. One of them learns how exactly to stop attacks, and the other one learns to sometimes not attack.
Huh? Is the time already? Well, then I'd better get going.
This is your last chance to run away.
Fight!
Ayane's main advantage is already being shown in this matchup. It's not so much about holding, but more so the fact that many of Brad's less conventional attacks are relatively linear, straightforward. This allows her to sidestep, and because she has one of the strongest sidestep attacks in this game, she can normally keep Brad at a distance if she's not feeling too confident. This means that he must use moves that are more telegraphed and could therefore then be held. Once he gets in close enough or things get a little bit confusing, it's much more difficult to deal with in that way. But she can use this run up sidestep or just standard sidestep in a lot more situations than many characters because of how effective it is. This will force Brad to use more of his basic holdable attacks instead of having the options that you're seeing in play now. Best of all, because Ayane's sidestep attack is so direct and strong, it isn't in itself all that easy to see coming or sidestep it. Her bigger problem is to sidestep normally. Against many characters this is a good thing, because it helps her reposition and get out of positions she wouldn't want to be in for long. But here, since Brad's moves tend to keep coming, and they're often follow-ups for whatever happened first, it's better to just get the strike, get the damage, and move on to the next interaction. Brad in turn should more or less walk in more often, since once Ayane has gone into that mode of thinking, it's a little bit difficult to actually get any damage anyway, so just assume she's not going to try to hit you in those ways and walk forward.
I will give it my all. Let's...
Huh? It's the time already?
Get ready. Get ready. Fight!
My fists are on fire.
I cannot lose this fight.
Down the hatch!
spirit you had a moment ago.
This may not be the end of our stream, but we're getting closer there. And we're kind of about where we started. It would be poetic to end it here, but we're not gonna. We got at least one more before we close up the stream part for the night. Possibly the lounge, because it's not necessarily that we're going too much longer.
No way. I'm giving this all I got.